Welcome to Picks with the Professor, the sports betting show brought to you by a real statistics professor. This is week 12 college football 2024 season. Cousin Jared, I feel like the beat just goes on. And rightly
Does.
so, week last week, 8% ROI on the season for all picks. Last week was a 7% ROI. So just kind of keeping on, up over 30 units now for the season in all plays.
Yeah, it's very good feeling, and we can't even get the midweek games figured out. If we could ever figure out the midweek games, we would be doing really well. But the past few weeks, the Saturdays have just been so good. They've kind of been pulling us out of that rut from the middle of the week. So yeah, nothing at all to complain about. I could generally find things to nitpick about, but hey, it's another positive week.
I can find things to nitpick about. I guess that's the difference between me and you. But this is also my baby, so that's the way that goes. I was thinking about that the midweek games we have just done so bad on, and it's a small sample size, so we don't want to overreact. We talk about our 8% ROI on the season is on a sample size of over 300 picks. Last year's good ROIs was 300, 400 picks as well. And so, we don't get distracted with small sample size. Anything can happen in one game. But I was noticing that the last 2 weeks that entering Saturday, we already started off in the negative and then had to battle back from that. We have a midweek game in this show. Had we not brought that up, that was my first question to you, was like, what makes you think we can figure this out now? And the answer is small sample size. We're not going to get too distracted, of course, but I did think that was interesting. So again, you can see all that on the screen there with how well things have gone as of late. If you want to join us in all this money making, the honor roll package is going to get you so many benefits. Discord chat, we have a great community of people that talk about picks on every single sport, projections, probabilities, price thresholds on all sorts of markets and all sorts of sports. So many goodies here. We're going to give you really the last day here, the secret link in the show description. It is set to expire here on November 11th. That's when we're recording this. We're recording this a little later than I expected, so I'm going to extend it one day to the 12th. Your last literal chance for the old pricing before things get up, folks. You will make this money back in no time with how well things have gone for us. People who jumped in for college football are just swimming in dollar bills at this point. And of course, we also have sport specific packages if you want just college basketball, which we'll have some more college basketball coming out this week, or football, or when we get back around to it next summer, MLB. Some quick reminders about the model. It's a player-based model, so the ratings reflect the current roster. This isn't about what they have done so far. It's what we think they're going to do going forward based off who is available to play. The average grade's 100. Higher implies more points, so offenses want to be higher, defenses lower. We are projecting an average game. Folks, the strength of this is not about that we know what will happen in one game. The strength is in the larger sample size of the full totality of picks. For all picks, again, Dub Club is the place to be. Link in the show description. We're just giving a handful here of things that we think are interesting to discuss. But we also have discussions about all these games over on Discord as well for anybody who has questions on them. We have a well-calibrated model. What that means is 55% winners win 11 times and lose 9 out of 20. That's okay because it tells us what makes for a good bet, what price, what number, and that's what we're all about here. Model gives ABC, love, like, lean. We choose the picks. We'll get to it with a Tuesday game. We're starting off in the midweek. One of our top plays, Ball State and Buffalo, a game that Buffalo is favored in, probably should be favored in at home. They're the slightly better team, but we're not going to go side. We're going to go total and go over 53.5. A-grade pick. The average game has 60.5 points according to Sideline. Ball State's defense is a thing.
It is really a unit that is on the field.
Yes, it is. It is a unit that is on the field. My mom taught me, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it at all. So that's what we're going to say about the Ball State defense. It is a unit that is on the field. Their pace is a little bit slower than average. Buffalo goes a little faster than average. Bottom line, though, is that we think there can be some points in this game, given that both offenses rate out better than both defenses. So we're expecting more than an average number of points. Because you're at over 53.5. What you got for us here?
You talk about small sample sizes. We're getting to the point in the season, though, where you, for the most part, you are who you are. And Ball State's defense is bad. The biggest thing, in my opinion, that you have to worry about in this game is the weather, with it being in Buffalo. Check the weather. It is cold, but winds 10 miles an hour, not anything too big.
No rain.
And so, no rain, no precipitation at all, no snow, anything like that. So it's going to be cold. But as we've seen with these MAC games, sometimes the cold is no hindrance at all to there being lots of points. So I expect this. You took the words right out of my mouth. The offense has the advantage anytime they're on the field. So this one definitely feels like one to me that gets into the low 60s at least.
Yeah, we talk about key numbers all the time. Your key number here is 55. So, of course, make sure you're shopping around and at least get on the lower side of 55 to go over. Right now, 53.5 seems to be pretty readily available. By the time you're watching this, who knows, is still over 24 hours away. Yeah, the cold tends to not affect totals until it gets frigid cold. We're talking about 10-degree type temperatures. This one will be more in the upper 30s, that sort of thing. So again, cold, but we don't see that affect scores too much. It does remind me, though, it's a good reminder, folks. We are about education. We don't want to ramble. We don't want to waste your time. But we do like to make sure everybody's a smarter, better in one way or the other. And it's just a good reminder that narratives, maybe not the smartest thing to always buy into. They are great for storytelling. It's fun to think about them. But a narrative, like with regards to weather, we have to make sure we understand which narratives are real and which ones are just fun, right? The real are winds, especially sideways winds, extremely cold temperatures, right? But rain doesn't quite make things as bad of a deal as you would think unless it's a downpour, right? We have to understand these type of things and not just say, oh, it's cold, we'll have fewer points, right? That's like saying, what was it, the game yesterday where we were one team had all the momentum in the NFL going into overtime and fumbled on. It was a Carolina game, right? I guess. Momentum going into overtime, and that was the narrative. And the fumble like the first play, Carolina wins like 3 plays later.
Yeah,
it's like, again, some of these narratives, right, are real and some of them aren't. We got to figure that out in this case. We think the weather's not going to be too much of a hindrance. So getting wins on the key numbers of 55, 58, 59 make a lot of sense. So we're going to start off going over in some action on Tuesday, which will take us to Saturday's slate, Michigan State and Illinois. A Michigan State team that started to play a little bit better as of late, showing some signs of life. Cousin Jared, I think you and I were both fairly high on the coaching hire. What he did at Oregon State was impressive. Just knew it would take a little bit of time. And you're starting to see at the end of the year, things come together a little bit. I guess an Illinois team that we've long been preaching we thought was a little bit fraudulent. We've got this at pretty close to a coin toss game. Illinois winning 52% of the time. That tells us Michigan State at a price like plus 142 gets you to that A grade. That's what we locked in on Sunday night and sent out to everybody on Dub Club. This price has started to fall throughout the day today. I was seeing mid 130s. As we're getting close towards Monday night here, more down to plus 130. So the price is falling. That plus 135 is what the model requires for the A grade or better. But even at a B grade at plus 130, we still think this is a smart pick. Cousin Jared, why do you like Michigan State here?
You talked about Michigan State playing a little bit better, and I said, just the last game, I said you kind of are who you are at this point. There are the exceptions. I feel like Michigan State falls into this. Another team that comes to mind is I think UTSA these teams have improved.
UCLA and Baylor both.
Yeah, they have improved as the season has gone along, and I think Michigan State falls into that category. I can't remember. Did they play FAU? I think the first game, and that game was one-score game. The majority of the game, 3 or 4 interceptions by the freshman quarterback there, and things have finally started to kind of turn around, and they've started to play a little bit better, which, like you alluded to, is kind of what you would expect with a Jonathan Smith coach team. Illinois, on the other hand, I feel like they peaked early in the season, had some good games, and they
had some really impressive close wins.
Yeah, but then they just, they had the game against Purdue that seeing what Purdue has done the rest of the season kind of leaves you scratching your head, and you just really haven't seen that progress, in my opinion. If anything, I think Illinois may have regressed a little bit. And so this is just one where I want to get the plus odds on a team that I think is playing better and showing progress week over week, as opposed to a team where I feel like it's just kind of stagnant.
Because Jared, the model says plus 135 for A grade. Where is your threshold? Is there a point where you're kind of saying I'm scaling back or I'm just not playing it, knowing that we've got this at about a coin toss? Michigan State, we think is slightly better, but on the road, where are you seeing that with regards to the number? Where you see things a little bit differently?
I think probably plus 125 would be my cutoff. I don't think I'd play it at anything lower than plus 125. But if you can get it, higher than that, I like it.
Yeah, and it's always something to consider, right? Because we've seen a lot of these money line markets, and it goes both ways, right? We always say it's kind of 2 out of 3 times that the market will go towards our number. So you want to get in early. Every once in a while, it doesn't. I don't know if we've got them later in this show or not. We do have them later in the show. We'll talk about one that's going the other direction, and the price is just getting better. So it doesn't always happen, but it's just something to keep in mind in these money line markets that we are still dealing with probabilities. We want to make sure that we're getting the best value. For the pick, and at some point if value's gone, we just pass. And so you're kind of saying plus 125. I think it makes sense given it's a coin toss type game. It doesn't mean that plus 115 wouldn't be smart. It just means maybe there's better investment opportunities here for your Saturday. So hopefully this doesn't drop anymore. Hopefully you got it in early already at a really good price, or at least it holds on there for you. But of course, folks, as always, we talk about it all the time. Shop around. Difference between plus 130, plus 135, plus 140, or versus a plus 125, right? Every 5 cents, every 10 cents can really matter. So make sure you have multiple books in your portfolio. If you don't have an account there yet, BetUS is a great place to be invested in as well. They have some great sign-up opportunities. Always check them out at BetUS. Sticking in this time slot here, the mid-afternoon, no early games on the show, but we have early game picks, of course, over on Dub Club. Hawaii and Utah State. Cousin Jared, one that you absolutely love here, one of our top plays, Hawaii, minus 125 on the money line to beat Utah State. Look at the rating of that Hawaii defense. Hawaii's defense, I'm not sure, has ever been in the top 40. The model loves what they've done. We've backed Hawaii all season from the very start. We had them last week. To cover against UNLV, and they got that done for us, losing a close one. They have won a lot of games that people didn't think they'd win. They've hung in a lot of games people didn't think they'd hang in. They have been so good to us. I don't know what else there's to say about this Hawaii team. We really like them. Utah State's defense leaves a little something to be desired. And that's really the main difference here is Hawaii's defense versus Utah State. Hawaii's gone on the mainland and done some interesting things. They've been more competitive this year on the mainland than ever before. They are eyeing a bowl game here. 4-6, got to win here down the stretch. They win a nice 69% of the time, according to the model. Cousin Jared, what makes this one of our top plays in your mind?
I will just say the same thing you said another way. One of these things is not like the other. When you compare defenses here, Utah State very similar to Ball State in that they are what they are on defense at this point in the season. I think Hawaii is going to be able to score a lot of points, and I think that they're going to get – it may just be 1 or 2 stops, but I think that's all that Hawaii is going to have to get in this game to come out victorious. So this is just for me. Utah State's defense is really bad. Hawaii's is good. Offense is not much of a difference there. So I'm putting faith in our boy Timmy Chang and the defense for the Rainbow Warriors out there.
How in the world did we land at Timmy Chang coaching a Hawaii team whose offense is below average and the defense is fantastic? Like what is happening?
It's got to only be a matter of time, right? Because you would think that he would bring at least the Hawaii, for non-Power 4 standards, he would eventually get the Hawaii offense to be fairly successful. And so, this is a team I think in the long run I'm pretty high on.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. And Utah State, I don't know. We haven't talked much about them this season. Do you have a take on this quarterback thing happening? Like if you told me at the start of the season, Spencer Petras from Iowa, who was atrocious, and then Bryson Barnes coming in from Utah, who was pretty solid in his time playing just about all of last season, I would have said Barnes was the guy. And all of a sudden Petras comes in as a starter and is kind of that's just blown my mind, that whole situation. He's actually been decent. He's been better than what we saw at Iowa. It's been weird times, I feel like, at Utah State this year.
Yeah, definitely with their coach leaving right before the season started. It's been a weird season all around. I'll be interested to see how it shakes out. Of course, with transfers now, everything changes every offseason. But I think this Utah State team in particular could have a lot of change going into next season. It would not surprise me if neither of those quarterbacks were there next season. Petras maybe having played himself into another situation that might be a little bit more advantageous than Utah State. And you mentioned there, he may just be like, I'm going to go somewhere where I can play. So it wouldn't surprise me if there were.
Yeah. We are hanging on to the late afternoon slot, or the mid-afternoon slot here, Missouri and South Carolina, 4:15 p.m. Eastern. We've got this at South Carolina winning by an average of 8.4 points. The model is very high on South Carolina, has them ranked number 12, number 3 defense in the country. We think South Carolina at home should be favored, but not by as much as they are. We're going to take the dog here. We're going to take the Missouri Tigers plus 13 A grade pick. Because there's a reason this total is 44, which is much more common for an NFL total than a college football total. What's your take on this game?
So I talked about Michigan State and Illinois, and I said I want to back the team that has shown some improvement. I will admit I am doing the opposite here. Missouri, definitely the team that seems to have stagnated, injuries being a part of that, and South Carolina has defensively has played really well. Offensively, and there's been some other people talking about this, their offense is really, and this seems obvious to say, but specifically for South Carolina, if they've been hitting the big plays, they have been really good on offense. And if you limit the big plays, they have a real hard time just being consistent and moving the ball, 4, 5, 6 yards at a time. But you mentioned that total being at 44. I think the totality of how these two teams have played games this season, I think it's just going to be a low-scoring, knockdown, drag-out kind of game. The backup for Missouri, this wouldn't be his first start. He played against Oklahoma this past week, so he's got a little experience under his belt. I think that Missouri's defense can do enough to limit South Carolina and not let them get too far out ahead. I would be very surprised if Missouri goes on the road and wins this one just because they've been banged up, Columbia being a tough place to play. But I can definitely see them losing this game by 7 to 10 points. And so that's really what I'm betting on, this being a close, low-scoring game.
You have to be careful by saying Columbia was a tough place to play in this matchup, though. It gets a little...
Yeah. Confusing. Well, yeah, that's true. That's very true.
Both Columbias? Doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
The one right now is the one that matters here.
Yeah.
This is a game where I think we often talk about, and I say often, maybe we haven't talked about it enough, right? But you hear it a lot, right? That you're betting numbers, not teams, right? And I always say that's a little too strong to me. I think you're betting teams and numbers. I think you're betting both, right? You can't ignore one or the other. It's not just the number, because you can give me all the points in the world, and if Alabama's playing a high school team, it doesn't really matter. So we got to consider both, and I think that's the main difference between this game and the Michigan State game, is that Michigan State game, it's being close to a pick'em is a very different situation than here, where you're getting 13 points, 13 and a half points, maybe. Who knows where this number goes? A lot of times more money goes towards the favorites on average. It'll happen that way. But, you get this at 14, you've got even more value on it if the number were to get out there. And so just a very different situation there with regards to the value that you're getting with the number. Because, Jared, if this gets to 14, are you then investing another half unit, or are you just content at 13 and a half? What's your thought on that?
I like a little more at 14, but I saw some 13 minus 105. I saw some 13 and a half. So I'm kind of good with all of it. Of course, I like 14 more, but doesn't materially change my thought. I want to be on it one way or the other.
Yeah, once you get out to the bigger numbers, the key number aspect of it's a little bit less valuable than it is at 3 and 7. Starts spreading out across your probability, so not quite as big a deal. 6 p.m. Eastern, Rutgers at Maryland. This is the one we talked about earlier with the numbers going the other direction. We locked this in at plus 160. I'm seeing plus 200s now, so you're getting even more value on this game. And we mention it from time to time that sometimes the model is just going to be an outlier. It's just going to see things very differently from the world. And that's okay. I don't try to, adjust for that. I don't try to change that. We don't use the line in the model at all, because we want to independently see things the way we see things. And this is one of them. We've got Rutgers winning this game by an average of 9.5 points, and the market's got Maryland favored. Now, you might say that's crazy. And I would say, look, the whole point of this is that the totality of the model's strength across all the games. It doesn't mean we're going to peg every single game individually. Sometimes we do on these. We had one, we have one every week like this. Last week, I think, was Texas State was a good example where the market had that, 14 points lower than we did. And it was a lot closer to our number than the market's. So you never know what'll happen. We may look really foolish on this one game, because, Jared, I know one of the things you like to talk about is, okay, maybe the model's off a little bit, but even if it's off a little bit, man, we still have slight value at plus 160 or the plus 200. The Rutgers money line, when the model thinks they win 72% of the time. The model just doesn't think Maryland's very good and thinks Rutgers is okay. I'm not sure Rutgers is good. They've played a fairly tough schedule. Both these teams looking for bowl eligibility, 2 quarterbacks that grade out pretty similarly. What should be a fairly closer to evenly matched contest, tilting towards Rutgers, and the market thinks, in our eyes. What's your take on this one, Cousin Jared?
So I assume that part of that line movement is they don't know if Monangai for Rutgers is going to play their running back, who's just really, really really good running back.
Yep.
But the thing is that at the end of the day, whether he plays or not, I feel like Rutgers is a team with a very strong identity, and Maryland still one that's struggling for that under, I don't know, I'm going to say he's been there for like 4 or 5 years. He may have been there for longer than that, but Loxley being there at Maryland, I just feel like these are the kind of games that Rutgers has won the entire time that Schiano has been there. Not only the second stint, but the first stint. Like, these are just the types of games that he finds a way to win. You mentioned Rutgers being a pretty good team. They had a rough stretch there where they got blown out by Wisconsin. They lost to an improving UCLA team. They went on the road across the country, got shellacked.
That UCLA game looks a whole lot different now.
It does.
At the time, it was like, oh my gosh. And then it was like,
yeah,
that was like when we first started realizing, like, oh, UCLA actually is like coming around a little bit sooner than we realized they would.
Yep, exactly. And then last week, I was very surprised that they beat Minnesota. Minnesota had been on a roll, playing really well. Like I mentioned, Rutgers coming off those 4 straight losses. I thought they might start packing it in, but no, Rutgers ended up winning that game. So, Rutgers can overcome adversity, whether the running back's playing or not. I like their culture. I like the things that Schiano does there. And Maryland, it's just like, I don't know what I'm going to get week to week with Maryland. And so, even if sideline's wrong a little bit, you kind of alluded to it, even if it's off a little bit, I think this is still excellent value on Rutgers.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, Monangai, didn't play was questionable heading into last week or doubtful as the week went along, whatever it may be. Didn't play, and they beat Minnesota, and I feel like Minnesota's better than Maryland. Maybe that's crazy talk, but it feels like they're a lot better. So they can still get it done. Another example of this, right? We had the Tampa Bay Buccaneers here in the NFL on Sunday getting 6 points or 5.5, 6.5, whatever it was, against the 49ers. McCaffrey coming back, and everyone's like, oh, McCaffrey's going to completely change the fortunes of this 49ers team. Everything's going to, and the 49ers won, they didn't cover. Right. And that's the thing there that we talk about with running backs is they don't make as big of a difference as you think they do, because so much about the running back position is, well, do you have a good passing game? Because if you don't have a good passing game, they can sack the box. You're probably in trouble. Do you have a good offensive line? Is all those guys healthy? Right. And then the difference in quality, it's just one of those things where it's not to say that a good running back can't help, but it maybe doesn't matter as much as our brains want to think, right? That was a good example there in the NFL, and a good example here with this Rutgers team last week. So obviously it's better if he plays, but if he doesn't, they just showed last week they can get it done without him, there's just a lot of other variables that matter there on that offense to contribute to the running game. And so, we're taking Rutgers here at the plus odds, even if we're off a little bit. It's still too much to pass up. I've seen the spread out to 6. Is there a point where you split your bet, where you add on to both? I was thinking about this myself today. I was looking at it. I was like, plus 200 or plus 6. Do I start splitting? Do I wait for 7? I don't know. I'm putting you on the spot. We haven't talked about any of this. Where's your bet?
I think I would say 7. I don't think I'm interested in 6 here, because if Rutgers doesn't win this game, let me rephrase that. If Maryland wins this game, it's possible that it's gotten a little bit higher scoring, and maybe Maryland wins by 10 points or something like that, 14. I just don't know if 6 is going to do you much good in a situation where Maryland wins the game.
Okay. And a lot's going to depend on who controls the style of play, right? You can see on screen the pace. Maryland wants to get up and down the field, play a lot faster. Rutgers doesn't. And so if it's Rutgers kind of game, that plus 6 is a little more enticing as well. But if it's Rutgers kind of game, like you said, they're kind of also, it's correlated with them being more likely to just outright win. If it's Maryland's kind of game, it's more likely to be bigger scores either way. And so, a lot of things to consider there. If it gets a 7, maybe that's when you're thinking about splitting your bet, but a lot of value either way on Rutgers, however you decide to play it. Arizona State and Kansas State, another top play for us here. 2 7-2 teams in a just hilariously fun Big 12. We say it every week. We love it every week. It's been fantastic. The model likes Kansas State's offense more than their defense. At home, thinks they should be favored by right about where the spread is. So we're showing no value on the side. We are showing some value here on the over. The market's got it at 49.5. We've got it at 57.8. Because, Jared, Kansas State can play a slow it down type game. We've seen that before, but their offense is just so dang efficient. We're going to go over in this one. Tell us why you like the over so much.
Is Kansas State's defense not good?
It's very questionable.
Yeah, and I think reflective of their place in the Big 12 standings. Not that they're a bad team, but just everybody in the Big 12 is flawed. Even I think BYU is flawed, but somehow doesn't lose a game. I'm not sure how that works. But Kansas State
that's what we call variance right there.
yeah. Kansas State though a flawed team, just like Arizona State is a flawed team. But I think that Kansas State's defense, I think, is going to lead to this game being more high scoring. I think Arizona State has proved adept at adapting to their opponent's style of play or doing exactly what they need to do to stay in the game. I don't know exactly what I'm trying to say there, but I think they're going to do just enough to keep this game close. And I think the way that they have to keep this close is they have to keep up with Kansas State's offense. I think Kansas State's defense will allow that to happen. And so, this is one, at the very least, I see this being an average scoring game, which is low to mid 50s, which we're still, getting lots of value there, considering that the number's currently at 49.5.
Yeah, and I think I saw it up to 50.5. At some places I've seen a 50 still. 50 not really a key number. 51 is when you start getting a little bit interested in your key numbers. 52 for sure. And so another one where we want to make sure we get it in again. 49.5, 50.5, not as big of a deal, but 50.5 is where we want to for sure be getting it in.
And I would be playing this up to 52. Like if you get to 52, I'm still playing it there.
Okay, 52.5 is where you're like,
Yeah, probably pass at that point.
All right, 52, more of a key number than 51. Getting the win or at least the push on 51 beneficial, but 52 is again your more likely of the two. So I'm going to go over on that one, folks. This week's slate lacks a lot, in my opinion. There's a lot of games. That's really the most positive thing I say. There's a lot of games, and something fun will happen. It's November in college football, but at least just looking at ahead of time, there's just not a lot of games you just are must watch here. Tennessee, Georgia is the exception to that rule. 7:30 p.m. Eastern kickoff. And obviously we wanted to cover this game because it's a big game people are interested in. Wanted to cover this game because the model has 2 A grades. And so kind of figuring out which one do we like the most. We're going to go Georgia -9. Sideline's got this at 17.6. A couple of thoughts on this one. Georgia was number 1 in the model last week, loses, and is still number 1. And so some people might say, wait a minute. Now, the teams they were barely ahead before, now they're just barely ahead of different teams. And it's really rounding error, actually, if they're tied with Ole Miss for number 1. But if you look at sidelines ratings, if you look at, something like SP Plus, which is a really good system, if you look at some of the other power rating systems I've seen out there, we've all got like the same 7 teams at the top, just all shuffled around just a little bit different. I mean, it's not really a clear cut who the best team is. And we've talked about that a lot this season, that in years past, there's been a top 2, top 3, top 4 that have really had a big separation. We are not seeing that at all this year. The gap comes more after 8 or 9 or somewhere in that ballpark. Yeah. And that's why we've got Georgia such big favorites here, is that we don't put Tennessee up in that same group. If Georgia's playing a team in that top 8 or whatever it is before it starts to really fall off, it's a very different story. And the model's got them at 15. Their offense has really struggled this year for what a Tennessee offense has become. Their defense has played really well, but we've still got Georgia as a really good team. We picked Ole Miss on the money line as one of our picks for last week. It wasn't one on the show, but we did have that as one of our official picks, saying Georgia's going to have a hard time going on the road and getting that win. And so that kind of gives me a little bit of confidence backing Georgia this week, is that we were off Georgia last week and we've been on Tennessee a lot, and now all of a sudden we're on Georgia against Tennessee. So just from a reading the model standpoint here, we've got these 2 teams as just in different classes, and think that Georgia can get it done at home in a night game where they are, you're getting to the point here where you can't afford another loss and still make the playoff potentially, which is crazy to think. But the SEC's gotten so crazy. You really need this win if you're Georgia. Not that means anything necessarily, but if you have any questions about their focus, it should be very strong this week. Because in Jared, Georgia -9, A grade from us. What's your take?
And Jake said it when he came on the college football show earlier this year, Tennessee's offense is overrated, and I think somehow it has just gotten worse since then. At the very least, it has shown no improvement. since then, which you would have thought, hey, younger quarterback, first full season starting, Josh Heupel, they will show some improvement as the season goes along, and that just absolutely hasn't happened. I will admit I have no explanation for the Georgia turnovers that just will not stop. Carson Beck may have thrown another interception while we were recording the show.
Probably did.
Yeah. But in general, angry Georgia has been a very good Georgia over the course of the season. You mentioned that their backs are kind of up against the wall. If they want to still have a shot to make the playoff, they can't trip. I would say, number one, obviously they can't lose a game. Number two, they probably have to start thinking about style points as well.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
They really need to win this game, I think, by double digits, especially being at home. So usually when you're laying this many points, you can't really hand over heart, say, I feel like my goals are aligned with that of the team. But I think in this situation, we're getting pretty dang close to where laying 9.5, 10 points, whatever it might be out there now, that your goals are basically aligned with what Georgia needs to do. Because I think they have to win, and I think they have to win big to start trying to impress the committee. So I think Georgia has responded well in these situations before, and I don't trust Tennessee to score maybe more than 10 or 13 points in this game.
How many angry teams make our list that we really like? I'm going to actually go a couple throwbacks, like angry Alabama with Nick Saban. Oh yes. Yeah. Give me that. I think angry any of the Harbaugh teams, whether it was Stanford or Michigan, when they were angry, those were better. Angry Georgia. I love angry Georgia. How many other teams make that list where you're like, man, when they're, because they don't lose often, when they do and the situation backs the wall, like you just feel like they really step up and show their dominance. It's a short list, right?
Yeah. It's a very short list. Those are really the only ones that kind of jump to the top of my mind.
I was thinking, I can't really come up with another one quick. I'm sure if we go back to the years, there's some that I'm missing there, but there's just not that many that I'm like, maybe a couple of the angry Ohio State teams maybe are the only other ones I can kind of think would even go in that class. It's like the opposite of what's the situation now with USC? It's like the opposite of whatever the heck's happening there, right? It's like their backs against the wall every week and they just play worse, right? These teams like this have tended to do well for us, so we're going to lay it here with Georgia. And again, I think the biggest thing to me, my full takeaway on this is obviously Georgia can win this one close. Obviously they could lose another game. But I really do like the fact that we were against Georgia last week, and the model has loved backing Tennessee basically all season. And now in this case says what it does. It, to me, indicates that the number's off a little bit. And I don't think the market's going to necessarily adjust too much to this. I think there will be people who will take double digits with Tennessee. And I say go ahead, take double digits all day long. And I think that's going to prevent the market from getting out too much. But if you're laying single digits here, it's just way too good to pass up, in my opinion. Just as a reminder, folks, if you've been winning money, if you've been watching the show, you should have been. Please consider supporting our show and Dub Club. We have a cheaper picks only package for just $20 a month. All the picks for all the sports. You still get some the information about what the top plays are, and you still get some discount codes there in order to get you a cheaper. Just consider sending it for that, helping us keep the lights on here. We really appreciate that. An extra shout out again to BetUS for helping us keep the lights on. An extra shout out to Dr. Pepper. You can't see, but this is a nice Dr. Pepper cup, who does not sponsor the show, but Dr. Pepper, if you're watching, we would love to be powered by the ice cold fans of Dr. Pepper.
All 23 flavors.
All 23 flavors of it if you're watching Dr. Pepper. Last one, Kansas and BYU. Everything else up until this point has been an A grade. We've got a B grade for you right here. A late night game, 10-15. Cousin Jordan, we have not had the pleasure of doing some late night. Now we've got some Big 12 after dark. We haven't done that after dark. There haven't been many games. They've been that interesting. We haven't had good picks for them. And in what seems like quite a while, we're going to go over 56. Model says 58.3. Your key numbers here that we're concerned about: 55, 58, 56. At 55, I think this becomes an A grade. 54.5 is for sure an A grade. I'm seeing some 55.5s now. I'm crossing my fingers. I would be surprised if we get a 55, but if we do, that's one where I think you run, don't walk. Don't even get greedy for the 54.5. Just take the 55. But the model thinks that 58, 59, which are two very common outcomes, are the most likely scenarios. This game might get into the 60s. Kansas got us an easy winner last week with the over. And when you look at it, their offense is so much better than their defense. Why not try it again? The last thing I want to say about this, Cousin Jared, we mentioned last week, we said Kansas still holding on to hope for bowl eligibility. 2-6, they just beat Iowa State fairly handily. Now they have to go to BYU and take down 9-0 BYU, who's not as good as their record for sure. But for Kansas to hold on to bowl eligibility again would be quite a feat and quite a little run from a team that we've said is not as bad as they've looked, but still going to be a tough task for them. Either way, whether they're able to pull it off, whether BYU continues this lucky streak, not really sure. I think it'll be a great game to watch, but we think there will be a lot of points. Cousin Jared, tell us more.
I've already got. I'm going to use this same logic next week on a game that we're going to talk about. I'm already skipping ahead to next week. I already know what I'm going to say about a specific game next week.
I don't even know which one it is yet. I'm so excited.
I'm going to use the same logic here. I think BYU has. Well, it doesn't really matter for the total, but I think BYU has so much pressure on them now, undefeated. A team that I still don't think gets a lot of respect. If they were to lose a game before the Big 12 championship game and then, make it to the Big 12 championship game and lose that, I'm not sure they get in. I still like there is still a lot of pressure on them to continue to win. I feel like Kansas is playing with house money at this point. They were like, the odds of us making a bowl game were pretty low. We won this one. Let's roll over all our winnings. Let's see if we can, make this happen. So I think Kansas is going to be playing pretty loose, and I think a fast and loose Kansas team is good for lots of points. Is what I would say. Flip it on the other side of that, and let's say that that just goes completely wrong, and Kansas plays fast and loose, and everything just blows up. Short fields for BYU. We know that they can be good.
I love the turnovers.
Yeah, they can create some turnovers, some special teams plays, especially at home. If this goes wrong for Kansas, I think that means that BYU has scored like 38 points or 45 points or something like that. So this is one of those where I think the game has to play out in a very specific way for it not to get into the upper 50s or low 60s. And that's definitely could happen. I just think that on the range of outcomes here, the ways this game can play out, I think more than most of them involve the game. Somebody scoring a lot of points one way or the other.
Right. I have a half-baked theory here. And what else is a show on YouTube good for other than half? Actually, honestly, if you watch ESPN, what is it good for other than half-baked? When you look at what Kansas has done this season, right? They had all of the hype coming into the season with hopefully a full healthy season from their hotshot quarterback. At this point, they did lose the offensive coordinator, but there was still a lot of hype from a coach who's had so much success at his previous stops. And they really fell flat early. But when you look at how those games played out, when they lost to Illinois, there were 40 points scored in that game. When they lost to UNLV, there were 43 points scored in the game. We've seen UNLV play in games in the 50s, 60s easily.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if they started out a little bit a little uptight, a little bit more like we've got to get the defense turned around, a little whatever. And then lately now it's been kind of like, let's turn things loose. They almost beat Kansas State, which was very impressive to hang into that game. They put up 42 on Houston, Houston's a team that, was for the most part prided itself in playing low scoring, ugly games.
Yeah. That is an outlier amongst Houston's season for sure.
Right. People are like, oh, Houston's bad. Yes, they're bad on offense, but they don't typically give up that many points. And then that last game where they put up 45 on Iowa State, it's almost like these last few weeks, kind of like you said, playing with house money. They're like, okay, that didn't work. I don't know if this is true or not. So I'm not saying this is exactly like what was going through the coaching staff's head, but it doesn't. When you look at it, it's almost like something's changed enough where they're like, okay, we've got to get up and go. We've got to play a little looser. We've got to go for the bigger play. We've got to get points on the board, and playing a little bit less uptight, a little bit less conservative, a little bit whatever it may be, has led to a little bit of a different stylistic change in their games. That's benefited them as a team, and it's also benefited us last week in the over. Hopefully, it'll benefit us here in this over for a late night game. Only B grade pick that we have on this show. Again, a ton of other picks. And again, if you're with us on just the picks only package, you still get all the picks. If you want everything else, all the fun Discord chat, all the probabilities, all the projections, all the sheets, all the everything, the honor roll, all access package is where you want to be. Other than that, though, Cousin Jared, parting words for the viewer as we enter, I can't believe it, week 12, we're already into mid-November here in college football.
Yeah, it doesn't seem right. You mentioned this slate is missing something. We're getting into the last couple of weeks of the season. I don't think that something will be missing after this week. So excited about that, and of course, college basketball picks, more picks than we know what to do with, almost literally at times. And so true. Yeah, stick around for that. Lots of good content.
Yep. All right. Well, as always, we thank you for watching the show. We wish you the best of luck and remind you that you can eat your betting money. Please don't bet your eating money.